What school won't tell you. Lesson 5. The Creation. Hi guys! Throughout our past episodes, we have reported on the Swiss man Billy Edward Albert Meyer and his contacts with extraterrestrial humans from the Pleiaren. Today we want to find out why the Pleiaren actually visit us in the first place. Aside from multi-layered research the Pleiaren conduct on Earth, their actual reason for visiting us is to help spread the teaching of the creation energy by Billy Meyer, the teaching of the truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of the life. The teaching of the life refers to all aspects of human existence, conscious and complete mental evolution, virtues, the development of personality, character, the proper way to live, but also to interpersonal relations, partnerships, and much more. The teaching of creation energy, on the other hand, is focused on all creational natural laws in every way, as well as on the creational principles, which are recommendations to follow in order to live up to the laws of creation. The teaching of creation energy isn't new by any means. It is in fact as old as creation itself and has also been taught on Earth throughout the last 10,000 years, but mostly only in oral form. The few written records which existed over centuries and millennia have been viciously falsified, which led to sectarian religions and blood deeds, as well as to legendary mysteries which unfortunately survived to this day. If we look at the history of terrestrial humans, it's obvious something went terribly wrong throughout the past millennia. How else could it be that out of 10,000 years of Earth history, a mere 250 years were actually defined by global peace? That is indeed a very sad state of affairs. We live in a constant state of discord, and the major blame for this falls on religions. Keep in mind that various religious writings like the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, thus all so-called holy books, have never actually been written by their respective heralds and prophets, but often centuries later by any random scribblers. They relied on various legends, fairy tales, and teachings which have been continuously altered and falsified through the course of millennia. They were reinterpreted and intermingled with falsehoods. Through these holy books of lies, people were forced into a blind obedience, which causes hatred, discord, jealousy, deceit, lies and slander, murder, torture, injustice, manslaughter, death penalty, violence, physical and psychical Gewalt, Ausartung, child abuse, destruction and elimination, as well as war and terror, thus causing immense misery and disaster. A so-called benevolent God who is supposed to love his people just so he can plunge them into eternal fires whenever he feels like it, serves as a deplorable example for people to also spread discord and terror of all kinds. The concept of an all-ruling, all-directing God, however, could not be any more irrational, but serves only to enslave the consciousness of the human being and to impede or prevent evolution. On March 14th, 2018, during the 705th contact, the Pleiaren girl Bermunda, who has studied Earth religions in great detail, has spoken the following words on this subject, which couldn't be more to the point. For us it is incomprehensible that such a delusion can be indulged in, which is so confused and so far from the truth and reality that even a human being who is severely limited in consciousness must recognize the nonsensical nature of such an irrational belief. Our incomprehensibility in this respect relates in a special way to the Christian religion because with its story of lies concerning the resurrection from death, It surpasses all conceivable nonsense to such an extent that not only a human being who is severely small-minded in consciousness must recognize the nonsense of such an irrational belief, but even one who is a slave to lunacy and completely devoid of all intellect and rationality. The fact that undisguised hatred and fantasies of Gewalt also arise from this story of lies, are spread and subliminally influence the lives of believers in Christ and determine their actions and deeds, is an inevitable consequence when their hatred breaks through openly and demands revenge, as for example in disputes or quarrel and war. This deviant or perverse and overgrown or proliferate faith in Christ corresponds to a very special delusion of which every human being who believes in Christ must be ashamed, because this faith contradicts everything that is reality and truth, common sense and conscious rationality, and thus the values that every modern and knowing human being on earth should strive for and represent or advocate. But this happens because the believers lack intellect and rationality, namely all human beings who are addicted to religion and belief in God, so that they force their offspring to believe and to be alienated from reality and truth at an early age. Therefore, every religious belief, no matter what kind, is already fundamentally dangerous to young human beings and absolutely unsuitable for their offspring, even at a young age, because their personal development towards independence and perception of reality and truth is maliciously destroyed by their belief. So how did the universe and thus creation come about? Let's start with the age. Terrestrial scientists theorize that the universe is about 13.8 billion years old. This assessment, however, has been subject to heavy debates. Rightly so, for their estimate could not be further from the truth. According to Billy's and Meyer data, our universe dates back some respectable 46.5 trillion years, that is 46.5 million years. Our scientists couldn't possibly figure this out because all material, all galaxies, nebulae, etc. renew themselves continuously every 49 billion, that is 49,000 million years. The universe has originated from the timelessness of the endless duration of the absolute nihilo, and through the endless energy of the nihilo, of the absolute nothing, an energy impulse has been created by which a tremendously strongly compressed mu, a most tiny mu iota, came about. This formed itself over the endless duration of the nihilo to a tiny energy globule which evolved in the further nihilo perpetuity to an equally tiny egg-shaped creation particle. This energized in itself up to a most compressed, tremendous energy mass which eventually exploded due to its unimaginably high pressure and manifested itself as origin of the Sein Absolutum, that is, the Sein creation, as the very first Big Bang of all existence, of all endless permanent becoming, passing and becoming again. Thereby, the origin of the Sein Absolutum was created as tiny mu egg, from which the tremendous might of the Sein Absolutum evolved, which, in the endless non-duration of its all-great ever-perpetual existence, created 6 more Absolutum forms, known as the Zohar, Super, Creations, Central, Ua, and Absolutus Absolutum, the last of which proceeded from the very first creation form ever. This initially developed as an inconspicuous mu, from which a mu iota developed, and subsequently a tiny energy globule, which energized in itself until it became a highly compressed, immense energy mass, which finally exploded due to its high pressure in a Big Bang and became the origin of the very first creation universe. After that, and since then, the Absolutus Absolutum has created and creates in endless succession, in the endless duration of the nihilo, incessantly new creations, which manifest themselves by a Big Bang, contain 7 dimensions as 7 universes, and evolve independently over trillions of years to one day return into the Absolutus Absolutum. There they continue to evolve to one day, after having attained the highest form of evolution, cross into yet an even higher absolutum form, into the primal absolutum. This process, which takes so much time humans cannot possibly fathom, continues all the way to the Sein Absolutum, which, thanks to the highly energetic creations uniting into it, grows increasingly mightful in energy to exist in endless duration. The energy of the creation, which proceeded from the Absolutus Absolutum, corresponds purely to its own creational energetic nature, which it created from in itself, yet relates back to an energy impulse of the nihilo, that is, of the absolute nothing. Due to their unknowing, human beings erroneously refer to a universe also as creation or universal consciousness, wherethrough there are, however, 10 to the power 49 different forms of creation that keep evolving throughout ever-changing new phases of existence. With the Big Bang as the origin of a creation, 7 creation belts or dimensions are formed in the almost egg-shaped creation space, which flow into each other throughout all of space, because the entire creation realm encompasses 7 belts. The 4th belt forms the belt of material, which the earthly astronomy science erroneously and falsely refers to as universe, which is in fact just the 4th belt of the entire actual universe. So that what is called visible material universe, in which the coarse material and therefore also gases, dust, celestial bodies and planets etc. are formed, and from which thus meteorites, suns, comets, nebulae and galaxies etc. emerge, whose condensations have created our Earth, is only a 7th part of the creation, that is, of the entire creation realm. And the formation of all of this in its entirety is a creational natural energy process, which has absolutely nothing to do with a creator God, but just with creational energetic physical and material physical laws and processes, which are physically and chemically based and can also be explained in this way. The creation exists as autonomy in itself, and is, if one may be calling it that, according to human understanding, so to speak, responsible for the universe, everything existing in it, and hence also for all life. It is the most immensely or gigantically and largest mass of energy and power which a human can possibly imagine. The creation is the being and non-being of life. It is the most immense mass of creational energy that can possibly exist. It is highest energy in purest form and unmeasurable in its power. Even though the creation is the relatively absolutely developed human beings know or think they may know, it must relatively absolutely fulfill itself relentlessly and keep evolving. So the creation creates incessantly new tiny fullness of creational energy, which as particle of creational energy individually gives life to every life form, no matter what species. Now the particle of creational energy has to fulfill its mission by relentlessly providing life energy or life power to the life form it has been assigned to throughout countless rebirths, until this life form has advanced its evolution to such an extent that it has developed the highest possible energy it is able to ever attain. If it has reached this highest attainable evolutionary energetic aggregate state no sooner than after 40 million years, then the particle of creation energy transforms itself as by a human being's self-attained, evolutionized part into the total mass of creation energy. If this has happened after countless lives and many millions of years, then the part of creational energy unites one day with the creation itself. That is, with the entire creational energy, and again becomes inseparably one with it, where through the creation itself relatively absolutely fulfills itself further and becomes more and more enormous. At the beginning of their existence and their evolution, human beings are completely unknowing and incapable. They must first learn to grasp and process all kinds of impulses for studying and building up their intellectum, their intellect and rationality, which emanate from their creational energy form, in order to absorb and utilize everything that they accomplish through their thought and consciousness evolution. The energetic power of their animating creation energy form remains always unchanged. However, throughout many lives, human beings learn to use, evaluate, and apply this power better and better. In doing so, they also gain more knowledge and wisdom and thus evolve consciously. The more lives humans live and spend learning consciously, the more knowledgeable and wiser they become, for they are more efficiently able to tap and process the energetic impulses of their creational energy form, which leads to greater knowledge, greater wisdom, and to more life power. Only understanding, rationality, their intellect and knowledge, as well as wisdom, which humans acquire through their conscious efforts with regard to the creational energetic impulses, which they cultivate and exploit, influence their lives and their consciousness, character, and personality. This goes to show the more materially oriented and devoid of rationality humans live, think, and act, the less they have developed their ability to consciously use the power provided by the creational energy. A purely material way of thinking without developing rationality and intellect means that a human being is still on a primary stage of consciousness development, which still needs a lot of progress. Just as human beings must keep evolving over countless lives and better learn to use and wield the energetic strength of their particle of creational energy, the creation itself, with its 7 universes, is subject to the same laws. We have determined that our universe is 46.5 trillion years old, that is 46.5 million years, and has therefore been expanding this long. However, the total duration of this expansion process amounts to a considerable 155.52 trillion years before the creation commences the contraction, that is to say, begins with the fallback at the same speed as the expansion occurred. Hence, the creation does not actually collapse during this contraction process, but the fallback occurs over a duration of 155.52 trillion years, during which all the energy that has been evolutionarily generated during the expansion phase becomes a power which compresses itself at the end of the contraction process in such a way that it becomes overpowered, and a subsequent new Big Bang ensues and a new creation form emerges, namely a so-called primal creation, which through its course of evolution will be followed by many more. So the expansion, which has begun with the Big Bang and its subsequent contraction, lasts 311 trillion years. This time is known as the awake period of the creation, which is naturally followed by a slumber period. When the creation goes to sleep for the first time, it does so for the same duration as that of the first waking period, namely for 311 trillion years. That is 311 times 10 to the power of 12 years. The next awake period of the creation then lasts 7 times as long as the previous one, that is 2177.28 times 10 to the power 12 years, whereas the following slumber period likewise amounts to 2177.28 times 10 to the power 12 years. It goes on like that in sevenfold form, while the duration of the awake and slumber periods of the creation keeps increasing sevenfold. This first sequence of the 7 awake and slumber periods, which amounts to a total duration of 85,384,834.56 times 10 to the power 12 years, is referred to as the Ur all-primal first creation, or just lowest creation. After the creation has evolved over this period of time, it develops into the primal creation, which again goes through 7 awake and slumber periods, whereby also their duration always increases sevenfold. After that, it evolves into the central creation, according to the same rules. This process repeats itself in further consequence 10 to the power 49 times, before the creation enters the absolutus absolutum. It is therefore quite apparent that the law of becoming and passing, of cause and effect, is given from the very beginning. We can observe this phenomenon everywhere in nature, be it the blossoming and passing away of plants, the perpetual rhythm of day and night, as well as the constant change between life and death. The becoming and passing each match 2 different poles, which refer to the positive as well as to its negative counterpart, respectively. The 2 opposing poles, however, create a circumstance of tension, and while each of the 2 poles forms a full unit on its own, they also form another unit once they are paired with the other pole. This circumstance of tension between 2 opposing poles in the common oneness is essential for all occurrences, all happenings, changes, and inevitably for evolution, for all becoming and passing away creates relentlessly something new, resulting in progress and an unstoppable ongoing further development. A permanent striving for evolution is a creation-given task and duty of any human being. Unfortunately, however, the God delusion belief prevailing on Earth prevents any real evolution of the consciousness, which is why a large part of humankind remains trapped in stagnation. Generally, the masses are deliberately kept on this level by religions and sects, as well as their constantly proclaimed God delusion belief, but also by authorities and governments on one hand, because they don't know any better themselves. On the other hand, also because humans can be easily manipulated, enslaved, and suppressed this way. The majority of the people on Earth doesn't care about these things, remains oblivious, and goes about their lives as best they can. In general, parents raise their children to have a good sense of duty, and they wish for them to have a good education and a successful career later on. Of course, they understand that occasionally young people enjoy themselves at parties or other leisure activities, but nevertheless, parents are eager to motivate their children to graduate from school quickly and successfully. That begs the question, why then are adults themselves not interested in a swift graduation? That is, in a quick, sound evolution, and finally in becoming one with the creation. They could accelerate the school of life, thus their continuous evolution, substantially, if only they would let go of their God delusion belief and would align their lives according to the eternally valid creational natural laws, and would leave their existence in peace, harmony, love, and wisdom. How sad is it to make the hoarding of material goods and the primitive dumb lust for might and dominion the sole purpose of one's life? None of these mundane things whatsoever provide lasting value and are therefore in no way conducive to the evolution of the consciousness of humans, because these are based in the fact that they recognize less and less the meaning of life and fail to become real human. One should always keep in mind, shrouds have no pockets. No matter how much wealth, might, land, and other goods a person accumulates during his or her current incarnation, none of it will endure. Only the evolution of the consciousness, the increased development of one's own power of consciousness, as well as the growth and expansion of rationality, intellect, knowledge, wisdom, a respectable personality, a good intellectum, and a valuable character will always benefit a person in future lives. Everything else is a waste of time, and it is at best inherent in immature adult people. Children, as a rule, do not waste their time, but learn from their actions and their games various things and skills that will benefit them later in adult life. The Plejarin have realized this a very, very long time ago and placed their existence into the service of the evolution and thus the creation. Does it come as a surprise then that they do not seek contact with immature, still very low evolved life forms like the Earth human beings? We should be grateful to them and Billy for bringing us the teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life, for the effort and the amount of work that both Billy and the Plejarin put into this is so much more than most people can even begin to imagine. Find more information on the creation and creational energy in Billy's many books, writings and figure publications. Subscribe to our channel for more interesting topics and hit the bell if you want to know about our latest publications. Well then, see you in our next episode when we will reveal lots of interesting facts again, what school won't tell you.